cult favorite of Story City. Saul Fussiner is a wonderful teacher. He's the director of creative writing at the Educational Center for the Arts, an arts magnet school in New Haven. He does a lot of wonderful things. He is a host and producer of Songs and Stories at Next Door in New Haven, a storytelling and singer-songwriter event. Saul has told or read stories at the Institute Library, Cafe 9, and Never Ending Books in New Haven, and at the Guerrilla Lit Reading Series and the Difficult to Name Reading Series in New York. He is the author of 2 produced screenplays, and his writing has appeared in the New Haven Review, Iconoclast Literary Magazine, and on the Easy Chair podcast. He previously performed with Story City many, many times. He produced and performed 2 wonderful one-man storytelling shows. I've heard all those drums before. Excuse me. Thank you. I've heard those drums all my life. It's about Ireland, and Ghosts of Poland about Poland. Today's story is from the latter, and his story is simply Tomek.
So a few years ago, I found myself in a Jewish cemetery in the Lodz ghetto in Poland. And on one side of this cemetery were these incredible ornate headstones with Hebrew writing, and around them there were sort of sidewalks of cement, and inside those sidewalks probably at one time were beautiful gardens, and now they were overgrown. But these graves spoke of a time of importance, spoke of a time of acceptance for Jews in Lodz, Poland. On the other side of the cemetery were these grave markers that looked like they were just sort of put up like sticks in rows. And those spoke of expediency. The graves that were ornate were, of course, the graves before 1939. The graves that were just the markers were the graves from the period of the Holocaust and the German occupation. When I was in that Polish cemetery, I couldn't help but think about my grandfather, Joseph, who never would have wanted me to be in Poland at all. He hated Poland and Polish people due to the experiences that he had as a child in that place. But I was really excited and interested about the prospect of Poland, a place that my family was from. I wanted to go there, I wanted to see that. And so I got this opportunity to work with this group of Jewish teenagers who were going through to see the Jewish sites from pre-1939, the Jewish communities of Poland, and then also to see the Holocaust sites, to see what happened and how that civilization went away. And on this trip, because there had been some problems oftentimes previously with Polish locals around Auschwitz and with the teenagers who were marching off to there, there were security guards. Each group, my group was the New England group, but there were groups from all different parts of the world, and all of these groups had translators, and all of these groups had native guides, and all of these groups had security guards. And our security guard was a guy named Tomek. And Tomek was sort of the perfect security guard. He had a shaved head and a goatee beard. He always wore mirrored shades, and he stood like this. And he had, he always wore fatigues, army fatigues with pockets on the side. And he was the perfect security guard because you would be walking along and be like, I wonder where Tomek is. He seems to have disappeared. And then every time you looked over, there he was, patiently watching. So I was fascinated by this guy. Now, in the evenings in the hotels, the group of Jewish teenagers and the rabbi and the educators and the doctors, everyone who was with them, we would eat at these long tables. And the Polish staff, Tomek and the guide and the translator, they would eat off by themselves at a smaller table so that they could speak Polish with one another. So it was these two separate dinner tables. So I thought, I'm going to go over to the Polish table. I want to get to know who Tomek is. And Tomek doesn't speak very much English, and I speak like 4 greetings in Polish, and that's it. So I go over to the table, and I say, all the Polish guys are gathered around. They're sort of surprised to see me come over. And I say, Tomek, do you like pierogi? And he says, oh, yes, I like pierogi. And I'm just trying to think of when I lived in the East Village, all the Polish foods I can think of. I was like, do you like bigos? He says, oh, yes, I love bigos, but I can't eat too much bigos or I become bigos. And so in that way, we start to have this communication, mainly just talking about food, because food is something you can say in both languages. And he appreciates me coming over and asking about the food, and so he says, I see you don't like the instant coffee. And he's correct, I don't like the instant coffee. We've been going through Poland and eating kosher food made in Brooklyn to avoid spending any money in Poland, and that includes this like very weak instant coffee. And he reaches into his cargo pocket and he pulls out this thing of dark roasted Turkish coffee cinched with a paper clip, and he says, from now on, you drink my coffee. I have good Turkish coffee. And so for the rest of the trip, in every hotel, in the morning, Tomek and I are the first people who go down for breakfast, and he takes out his Turkish coffee, and we've got the hot water to make the instant coffee. We make his Turkish coffee, and we have coffee together, and that way we get to know each other. And when we finally get to Lodz, we get to the Grand Hotel where we're staying, and in front of the Grand Hotel in Lodz is the Polish Film Hall of Fame. It's like the Chinese Grauman Theater in Los Angeles, where there are stars on the pavement. But the stars there say Agnieszka Holland, or they say Andrzej Wajda, or they say Krzysztof Kieślowski, right? They say the names of the Polish filmmakers. And I'm looking at these and I'm really excited. In college, I was the president of the Film Society, and I'm like, oh my God, there's Krzysztof Kieślowski. This is great. And Tomek sees this and he's like, you're a film fan. You know Polish film. I am a film fan. And he's telling me about this film by Andrzej Wajda about the history of Łódź and about how in Łódź there were these factory owners, and in the film there's a Jew and there's a German and there's a Pole, and they all sort of work together. They're sort of dastardly factory owners, but they have this friendship where they work together. And I think that's what Tomek was trying to convey to me, that connection there in Łódź. So finally in Łódź we go to the ghetto cemetery. And the cemetery, part of why it's so beautiful and well preserved is because it was encased in the ghetto. So the Germans didn't bother to even try and destroy this cemetery. It was in the ghetto once the ghetto was cordoned off in Łódź. So it was a magical day when we went to the cemetery. One thing that happened is all these groups from all over the world had Holocaust survivors who were coming with them. So one of our Holocaust survivors started talking with a guy at the gate of the cemetery, and the cemetery was closed. I'm like, who are you talking to? Who's this guy? He's like, this guy, he goes to my Schwitz. He's from Jersey, right? He was from the New Jersey group. We were from the New England group. So they just meet there right in front of the cemetery, and we go in, and Willie, the Holocaust survivor, his daughter knows that Willie's uncle is buried in this cemetery. But the cemetery is closed. We have no map of the cemetery. But she reads Hebrew, and she starts to read the stones, and she starts to wander away from the main group, and she finally comes to a place in all these ornate stones where she finds her uncle's grave, and she brings Willie over to see the uncle's grave, almost as if she was called to it by some ghostly presence, calling her away from the group to find this grave. That's the kind of magic that was happening in that day. And I'm wandering between the ornate headstones and the expedient grave markers. And finally I come to this area in the middle of the cemetery, which is where Poznański, a big Jewish sort of robber baron of Łódź, is buried. Now in the center of Łódź, the museum of the city of Łódź used to be his palace. He had a palace in the middle of Łódź in the 19th century. And so what I see is his grave, which is this incredibly tall mausoleum, the largest Jewish mausoleum in the world that says Poznański on it. And it's really startling. It's a startling sight to see in Poland, to see this Jew's grave that towers above everything else, towers above the city, this enormous mausoleum. So I'm sort of struck by this thing and this message from another time period in this place, and I'm staring at it. And I feel someone come up behind me, the way that you can sense someone's presence, but you don't look at them, and I don't look back, and I hear Tomek's voice, and I hear him say, "This is my history too, Mr. Saul. We share this history." And I still don't look back, but it's that way in which when you're looking at something on the horizon and someone else behind you is also looking at that same horizon line, it's almost as if you are staring right at one another. Thank you.